Towards the end of my college years, I set a goal for myself to become trilingual at some point in my life. And last year, in May of 2019, I put that goal into action and began self-studying Korean. So now it's been just over a year. Here are 5 things that I've learned. Hello everyone, 大家好, 안녕하세요 여러분. Welcome to AB Chinese, where learning Chinese is fun, practical, and no nonsense. Of course, I'm focused on teaching Chinese on this channel, but as a fellow language learner, I felt it would be really appropriate and cool if I shared my own language learning experiences with you guys. And by sharing some of these things that I've learned and mistakes I've made, it can help you in your studies, whether that's Chinese, Korean, or maybe even another language. So without wasting too much time, let's jump right into it. The very first thing that I learned in year 1 of Korean is that consistency really is key. I've heard this statement before, whether it's in language studies or just in academics, that if you practice something every single day, it's a lot better than practicing 1 hour here, 1 hour there, and skipping days in between. But I never really felt the effects of it. I mean, maybe it was because in school I didn't really care about what we were learning, and right now I'm actually trying to learn Korean. But either way, I have a study schedule, certain things I would do on certain days, and whenever I would break that schedule, if I skipped out on a day and didn't do anything, or even 2 days, and heaven forbid more than that, I would always find myself having a really hard time getting back on track, and I would have to do extra review to review the things I just learned that I really should not be forgetting so much, but I find myself forgetting them because I skipped out on too many days and broke the schedule. Another thing I realized is that momentum really helps consistency. When I first started learning Korean, I think it was in the first week or so, I started using Duolingo, which a lot of you know as the free language learning app. And they have this feature called a streak, where they keep track of how many days consistently you've been practicing. So you want to practice every single day to maintain your streak. And if you miss out on a day, you lose your streak and you go back to 0. Well, I was on a streak from the very first time using Duolingo. I did not skip out on a single day until day 116. I was on a 116-day streak, and then one day, for some reason, I forgot to do Duolingo. And the next day, I lost my streak. And here's the point. After that happened, I was never able to get my streak back up to above a 20 or something. I would always just be not as motivated, not as focused, and I would lose my streak all the time. Actually, only recently I got my streak back up to 49. Here, let me show you. 49-day streak. So I guess the takeaway here is, if you're trying to study say 30 minutes a day and you find yourself skipping days and not having enough time to do it, I personally think it would be better if you cut that time down to 15 or even 10 minutes a day to the amount where you can do it every single day, where you can practice every single day to maintain that consistency, and that will really help you not forget things and maintain your motivation. So the second thing that I've learned is multiple inputs really help your retention. And what I mean by that is to learn your material from different sources and not just one source. When I first started learning Korean, the first source that I consulted was KoreanClass101.com. And that was just because I did a search on YouTube and they had some good videos, so I started using that program. And the other thing I used was Duolingo, which, because it was a popular app, I knew about it, and I figured I just used these 2 tools, an app and a program, and that would be good enough. And part of my thinking was because I'm the kind of person where I really like structure. I like to move in stages, and I like to learn things well before I move on and not jump around, if that makes sense. Thankfully, I experimented a little bit and I found this other app called Drops in the App Store. And at first I thought it would be bad for my learning because it was structured differently, so I wasn't learning in the same sequence of things. So all I mean by that is that it would teach different things first and different things later. Now what I actually found by that, having these programs all teach different things at different times, is that if I encounter something in, say, Drops first, and it was the first time me encountering this vocabulary or whatever, and later on I found it in Duolingo, and later on I saw it in Korean Class 101, each time it would reinforce itself in my brain and I would remember it better. And learning the same material from multiple sources is also better review than if you just learned it from one source and then reviewed it within that source. So after I realized all of this, I also added using Viki to watch K-dramas to my arsenal. That's really good real-life practice. And I also started watching this YouTube channel, Korean Unni, hashtag Dondon Squad. So yeah, using multiple sources, it's just really good practice. It's really good for your retention. And not to mention, it's super cool when you see something from one source and you think, wait, I know this word because I already learned it from somewhere else. The third thing I learned is to not associate new vocabulary with your native language. So you kind of have to unlearn your native language in order to learn this new language. And this one was something that I didn't really think about at the beginning because, well, in Korean there's a lot of loanwords from English, like tomato is tomato and banana is banana. And there's also a lot of words that came from Chinese, like taeyang is taiyang or 숫자 is 数字. So it was like kind of easy for me in that sense, but when I encountered a word that didn't have any connections to anything, I slowly started to realize that when I associated with an English or a Chinese word, so for example, if I were learning 아침 is morning, and I repeat to myself 아침 morning, and they were on my vocabulary card, 아침 morning, then what would happen is when I go to use it, if I wanted to say morning, then I would think in my head, morning. Oh, 아침. And that would slow things down because I'm essentially translating in my head instead of going directly to Korean. There's like a hurdle I have to go through. So what I started doing for words that I struggle with like that is I started connecting it to the concept. I started visualizing in my head because I'm a visual learner instead of connecting it to the English word. So for 아침, well, that was kind of a hard example because, well, it's morning. I guess I would visualize morning, but for like another one, K is dog. Instead of thinking K is dog, I would think about a dog. Okay, an animal with floppy ears, really cute, barks and runs around. Okay, K, that's what that is. And this way I wouldn't be jumping over the hurdle and I'll be going directly from the concept to the Korean word. And if you're not a visual learner, I guess there's other ways you could go about this too. To connect with a dog, you might think about a dog's bark if you're an oral learner. Or for example, a word I learned recently is yaku, which is pharmacy, and when I learned that word, I drew a house and put a sign on it and wrote yaku. And I imagined myself going to that pharmacy with that sign on it. So there's just some ideas that you can use. Okay, so the next two things I'm going to talk about are not so much things that I learned as I learned Korean, but they're things that I did while studying Korean that, in hindsight, looking back at them, I'm really glad I did them and they're a good idea. So number 4 is to break down new vocabulary. And this is especially true if you're an early beginner and you're learning phrases. The first reason to do this is simply because it's easier to remember something if it's meaningful to you. If you're remembering a phrase and you don't know what any of it means, you just know what the whole phrase means, you're just remembering a bunch of mumble-jumble sounds. Like if I told you that 영어 하세요 is do you speak English? And you try to remember that, you might have trouble with it. But if I told you that 영어 is English and 하세요 means to do, then you think, oh, 영어, English, 하세요, to do, 영어 하세요 is do you do English. Okay, that makes sense. And wait a minute, that also sounds like 안녕하세요. Oh, okay, so 안녕하세요 means to do something. 안녕 is, oh, 안녕 is peace? Okay, so that means to do peace, and that's what Koreans used to greet each other. Okay, that makes sense now. Do peace. And this is the frustration I have with some of these programs, and I'll use Korean Class 101 as an example, not to call them out. I think they're honestly a great program, and I can understand why they do it, but also I wish that they didn't. Take a look at this lesson where they're teaching you about going to a restaurant in Korea, and they're saying here that to call for a waiter, you can say 저기요, which means excuse me, in quotes. Now if you looked up 저기, you would find that it actually means over there, and yo is just the polite particle. So you're actually saying literally over there. So what happened here? So what happened is this phrase 저기요 means over there or you over there, but it functions as excuse me. But it's a lot simpler, of course, to just teach someone and say, oh, this is excuse me in a restaurant setting. But this is why on my channel, when I teach things, I like to teach you guys how to use phrases, but I also explain literally what the phrase means, because I think this really helps you learn and remember these phrases, and also it gives you an insight to the culture as well. So Korean restaurant culture is obviously a lot different than American restaurant culture, where you would just wait for the waiter or waitress to come over to your table. You would never say, hey, you over there, come over here. But it's a lot more similar to Chinese restaurant culture, where you can call for a waiter and it's not considered rude. You would say 服务员, which is just waiter. Hey, 服务员, chakyo. You know, whatever. Alright, so last one, number 5, is to master the basics. And I think this is one of the most important ones, and it was definitely important for me because when I started out with Korean, I did not know anything about Korean. So all I did was, like I said, I went on YouTube, and YouTube, the best place for education, and I searched up basic Korean, and this Korean class 101 video came up, and I thought it looked pretty good. So let's start with this video and watch it. So I even got my notebook out and I took notes, but because I didn't know Hangul, which is the Korean alphabet, I had to use romanization. But then like after a day or two, I started to realize this isn't going to work. Like, how am I supposed to know that E-U-I sounds like E and W-O-E sounds like wo? It's just, whenever I see these letters, I can only associate them with English, and I would pronounce them English-fied, so my pronunciation would never be accurate. That's when I decided I was going to go back to the basics and learn them well. So I actually ripped out the first page of Notebook to start fresh. I found a playlist to learn Hangul, and I spent a whole month learning not just Hangul, but also patsim, which is the way they're stacked on top of each other's, pronunciation changes and rules like that. This way, whenever I see a new Korean word that I didn't know, I would be able to sound it out and in relatively accurate pronunciation. I mean, we all know the saying, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, and I think that's exactly what we're talking about here. If you don't get started off on the right foot, you're gonna build up a lot of bad habits, and later on, if you say, oh, I'll just fix it later on, it's gonna be really hard and really costly to fix later on. It's not gonna be as easy as you think it is once you build up those bad habits. Actually, when I was in college, I studied piano for 2 years, and my professor told me that when he gets a new freshman piano student, he usually spends the first year not on learning anything new, not on progress, but on the student unlearning all their bad habits from before. And yes, that applied to me as well. So don't be the person that has to say onion haseyo because you didn't learn Hangul, or the person who's asking, is it pronounced ibnida or is it pronounced imnida because you didn't learn patsim. Alright guys, thank you so much for sticking around until the end. I hope that my experiences with Korean can help you in your studies of Korean or Chinese or whatever languages you're learning right now. If you enjoyed this video, I would definitely appreciate a big like, and you don't even have to subscribe because I teach mostly Chinese on this channel, okay? So there won't be a lot of Korean videos, although I do plan on making occasional videos about Korean or my progress with Korean. I mean, I am trying to be trilingual after all, and that's a pretty lofty goal, so I think I'll document my progress at least annually. So if you want to stick around for that, feel free to. That'll be all for now. See you guys next time. 下次再见. 다음에 봐요. 안녕.